Hello.
Hey,
Dan, how are you?
so good, Rubital. It's been just a whirlwind of activity, excitement, fun. There's so much coming up. Argo CD 3.0, Argo Con in London, KubeCon. We're working on features to get into the 3.0 release. We're freezing in 2 weeks. We got lots to go there. We've got new stuff launching from CodeFresh at KubeCon that we're going to be talking about soon, but not in today's episode. So yeah, it's been good. It's been a whirlwind, and as you know, I've been on Australia. But really, Tal, how have you been?
Wow, that was a great opening. I'm good. I'm good. I want to welcome everyone to Argo Unpacked episode number 2. And when I think about it, I'm assuming we will have one more before KubeCon.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we should.
So that's exciting because we will be there at KubeCon. Will be fantastic to meet a lot of new people and see more about Argo CD. So that will be fantastic. So what do we have today, Dan?
So today we're going to be talking about application sets, which are one of the coolest parts of Argo CD. Last time we did a very kind of slipshod introduction to Argo, talking about applications and ignoring differences and a few favorite features of Argo CD. One of the things that we really recommend to our users is to make extensive use of application sets because they really simplify the experience of using Argo, even though there's some complexity built into them. And we actually we're going to invite 2 guests to help us do that. The first is Kostas Kapolonis, who many of you should know because he created all of the GitOps training, learning certification, and is just brilliant all around and a repository of knowledge across the board. And then we also have Luke Phillips, who he and I actually gave a deep dive talk on application sets at KubeCon in Chicago. Where were we?
Wasn't that Paris? Yeah, it was Paris.
Paris. All right, sorry, wherever we were. And yeah, we did a really fun talk about kind of pushing application sets to their limits and how you could generate programmatically generate an application set that would generate applications essentially forever, and among other things that were bizarre. So yeah, that's what we're gonna be jumping into today is application sets. And Luke, Kostas, any other intro words for yourselves?
I just wanted one thing. We're going to start with the very basic of application sets. So basically, this episode is for everyone. And then as we move forward, we will go deeper and deeper. Every question, every comment is welcome. So put it in the chat. I will notice that, and we will make sure we answer all of the questions.
I have something to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm talking to the audience, and maybe you have seen some of us in ArgoCon or KubeCon doing an official presentation where we say how things should work. But because this is an unofficial event, here we can say whatever we want. So if you ever wanted to ask all the difficult questions or all the behind-the-scenes stuff, now is your chance. Just do it.
I love
You
it.
want to ask who's really funding application sets? This is the hard-hitting time to do it.
Bring your hardest questions. The two Kostas' comment, if you saw Dan and I's presentation, it was full of all the things you should not do at home. Hopefully this time you learn all the right things here. Yeah.
I find it's much easier for me to present on the things you're not supposed to do than it is to present on the things you are supposed to do.
So maybe let's start with a quick intro. Luke.
Yeah, Luke Phillips, staff engineer located in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. As they're saying before, frequent ArgoCon speaker as well as just Argo community member. I'll hand it over to Kostas.
Hey, so my name is Kostis. You don't actually need my surname because if you just search Kostis Argo CD or Argo Rollouts, you will find several of my articles. I'm working with the Argo Rollouts team mainly, but also Argo CD. and I'm the co-author of the GitHub certification. So if you have done the GitHub certification from CodePress and you have comments, now it's also your chance to speak about it.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that we will start with some fun riddles. I will ask a question. I will give you 10 seconds to answer those questions. And I want to see in the comment your answers. So let me see if I'm able to make it work. Let's get ready for the first question. I control which apps are part of the set by pulling from a file that you can bet. With a URL, I know where to look, and I fetch all the apps just like a book. What am I called? Now, wait a second. Okay, you have 10 seconds to drop your answer.
Get it in the chat.
Yes, generator.
Oh, and we're saying it's a Git generator.
Git generator,
specifically.
that's the correct answer.
Yeah. Well, Laurent, I think that's what Laurent meant, right?
Yeah, because with the URL, I know where to look. So I guess it's pulling from a specific. Yeah, we don't have like a random file generator that doesn't use Git.
Wait, also we need to say if somebody in the audience doesn't know anything about generators, we will talk about it later, okay? So don't worry if this is something that you don't know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we will be moving to the next question. I let you deploy multiple apps with control by grouping them together in one central role, but I take care of the details through branches and files. No need to repeat yourself across miles. What feature am I?
Not too unlike the Git generator in theory.
All right, 2 more seconds. Do we have any answers in the comment? We don't. Application set controller. You guys want to say something about application set controller? Almost.
Yeah, that's the workhorse that's going to generate files or generate applications, which we'll explain. I kind of thought this was going to be like a file generator because it talks about through branches and files, but it is. I mean, that is what the application set controller does, so that makes sense.
So, Laurent, you'll get another point. Okay, one more question and then we will get started with the fun. So, myth or fact? You can only deploy a single app per application sets. What do you think? Is it a myth or is it a fact?
We're saying single Argo app.
Yes.
Many Argo apps. Yeah.
So that was right. You can deploy multiple apps. Yes, myth. Awesome. Mm-hmm.
That's the whole crux of application sets, is that you can create like a million apps.
Let's do
Where's
one.
that's when you cue the meme, like guy slapping the car and he's like, you know how many he's like, you know how many apps we can fit in this application set?
I'm having fun. Let's have one more. Myth or fact? Application sets can only be used with Git's repository. What do we think? Is it a myth?
You got a sharp audience. They're gonna know this one for sure.
Okay. Yes, that's a myth. I'm not sure if it was for this one. Okay. Oh. Alrighty. Maybe we'll have more fun riddles as we go forward. I don't want to waste too much time. So, Costis, you guys want to share your screen, or you would like me to drive it?
No, you can drive it, I think, at least in the beginning.
Okay. Give me
So the
3
way we have split this is I will say the easy stuff, and Luke will say the hard stuff. But Luke, you can interrupt and say, no, I disagree with you there, and say something else. Remember, this is unofficial, so you are free to say whatever you want. Okay, but it's just slides, Revital, so you can advance them. I will give you a hint when you want to do it.
Okay.
And just to make sure, we will start from zero, like application sets 101. So if you didn't understand any of the riddles, this is for you. And of course, we want everybody to be on the same page. And just to explain something, I have avoided putting any YAML in my slides. I don't want to show you YAML, and that's on purpose. So if you are one of those people that say, hey, I want to see the YAML, I want to see the YAML, you will not see any YAML from me, okay? Because I see that some people are getting confused, or they dive into the YAML real fast and they don't understand the purpose. So I want to talk about the problem, about the solution, and how you're going to use them like on a high level before we dive into the YAML.
Well, I
Okay,
actually appreciate that, Costis. I don't like to see YAMLs.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
go to the next one. So this is like the default dashboard of Argo CD that you see, without any apps. And it has many buttons. And one of those buttons is a button that says new application. And if it was up to me, I could actually remove this button completely, or I would just make it that if you click it, you get a big warning, like a big red sign that says, what you're doing right now is just for experimentation. It's not for production. You shouldn't do it in production, and some kind of warning. Because every time you press this button, you can go to the next slide, Vital. Oh, no, we missed the bunny. The bunny, go back.
Disabling that button, by the way, is oftentimes the first thing that people
Go one
do
back,
when they
Revital,
deploy
please.
Argo CD.
I got to see the bunny.
Immediately
There is a
disable
bunny
that for their
there.
users.
So was the bunny.
I
Where's the bunny?
apologize. I
Yes, the bunny.
apologize.
That's it. This
The
is the
cute
slide.
bunny.
You harm a cute bunny every time you use this button. So this button is dangerous because it presents you a nice form and it asks you for application details. And there you can say, where is my repo? Where are my manifests? How I want my application deployed? You press the button and then you get an application. And this is super nice and it works, but your application is not saved anywhere. And for me, this is pretty interesting when you have Argo CD, which is a GitOps tool that allows you to do things that are not GitOps. So if you press this button, your application is saved anywhere. And if you lose that cluster, you lose all your applications. And you might think that this is something obvious, but all of us are in the Argo CD Slack channel, and you should also be in the Slack channel of the CNCF Slack. And we have seen people that come to us and say, hey, I have 5,000 applications and I created them with the create button and they're not saved anywhere and I want to migrate them somewhere else. What do I do? So this is a real problem. Don't do it. Don't use this button. It's fine for a quick demo or if you want to try something, that's perfect, but you don't use this. Instead, you should use, go to the next slide, Vital, the application. So this is some YAML. It's not, still not an
This looks
application
a lot
set.
like YAML. I gotta be honest with you.
It's not an application set, and it's pretty simple. Revital, tell me if it's simple. Okay, so this is the simple one. It's the simple application. And in your mind, an application is just a link between a Git repo and a cluster. Okay, you can put many other stuff in an application, but in the most basic sense, it says take these files, and I don't care what are these files, and put them in a cluster. But there is a twist. Go to the next slide, Vital. Okay, don't mention the twist. If you have seen this movie, don't say the twist because some people might have seen the movie. But if you know the movie, feel free to write the name of the movie in the comments. So there is a big twist as big as this movie, okay?
So
And
Die
I'm saying
Hard?
this.
Is that it?
Huh?
No, it's not Die Hard.
No.
No.
Look, you don't know this?
I do, yes. But I would
okay.
ruin
It's a classic one.
the twist that way.
It's M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong.
Yeah, I think if you
Yes,
if you
the
are
Sixth
over,
Sense.
yeah, the Sixth Sense. If you're over 30, I think you should have seen it on the cinema. Yes, it was in 1999 or 2000, something like this. Anyway, there is a big twist in this movie, and there is a big twist with application sets. So go to the next slide, Vital.
I see applications everywhere.
So the big twist is you shouldn't write applications. Yay! And I'm saying this because, again, people see the application YAML and then they start writing application YAMLs. They start writing application YAMLs. You shouldn't do that. That's the twist. So
Mhm.
it's good to know what is an application YAML, but you shouldn't write application YAMLs yourselves. Of course, if you have a small Argo CD installation, maybe you use it in your house and you just have 3 applications. That's fine. Yes, please write application YAMLs. But in the most, I would say, basic company environment where we have lots of applications and lots of clusters and you have different combinations of clusters and applications, you don't write applications by at least by hand. Okay, maybe you have another tool in your company that you do things. So here I'm using the classic meme where you should use application sets and not applications. Okay, that's the twist.
So it's like maybe you're going to get to it here, like chicken and egg problem, right? What comes first, the application or the application set?
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this, but the central part should be application sets. Okay, that should be your main working unit. Like if you're working in a company every day, then you have developers and they come to you and they ask stuff, or you create brand new clusters and you need to do something there, or you want to create new configurations. The things that you should change are application set stuff. Like that's your main abstraction. So use application sets. Don't write things by hand. And then another big misconception that I want to explain, because again, I see this too many times in the Slack channel, is people come to us and they ask, oh, should I use app of apps or should I use application sets? Like it's an alternative. You need to use one or the other. Or they come to us and they say, oh, maybe now I had the app of apps, but this is the old thing. And the new thing is application sets. And I'm going to migrate from app of apps to application sets. Okay. This is also wrong. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's not a problem. We will talk about this a bit later. But if you have seen app of apps, it's not like an alternative. It's not a replacement. It's not something that you should abandon. Actually, the recommendation, as we're going to see, is to use both of them at the same time. And if you know the history of Argo CD, application set, at least in the beginning, was an external controller. It wasn't part of Argo CD. I think Red Hat contributed this, Dan. Do you remember? Or Luke? I think it was Red Hat.
Yeah, who donated?
Yeah, so it was an external controller and you had to install it along Argo CD. Like you had to install Argo CD first and then install the application set controller. And then people said, no, this is a very useful feature. We should have all in a single package. So today, if you're using Argo CD, you get the application set controller as part of it as well. But there may be a chance where you had already worked with app of apps. If you look at the history of Argo CD and you thought that application set is the thing that is replacing them, it's not, okay? So the recommendation is to use both. That's the recommendation. And actually, you should group related application sets in app of app files. And we will talk about grouping. And this is how you should also do cluster bootstrapping. So if you go to the next slide, Revital, and also show the video, here, remember, no YAML. I have a live example where I'm starting with a cluster that has absolutely nothing. And I deploy, with kubectl, just for demonstration purposes, a app of apps file that points to several application sets, okay? You don't even need to know what is the YAML on the screen. I just apply it in a real environment. It would be with Terraform or with Pulumi, something else. And instantly I get, I think it's 13 applications in my cluster out of 0. Okay, so I started with nothing and I got 13 applications. And I think I don't remember if it's many application sets or a single one, but this is right in front of your eyes, a way to combine app of apps and application sets for cluster bootstrapping. Okay, so you can actually ask this today in your company if you're not using Argo CD, how fast you can do this today. Like if I give you a cluster with 0 things inside, how many actions you need to do in order to bring the cluster to the state it's supposed to be. So in this example, it was just one. I did one thing, okay? Maybe it was a kubectl command, but I did one thing. So that's how you should use it. Let's go to the next one.
Should call it app of application sets.
App of application sets.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the pattern we want you to follow.
Okay, that's the look pattern. So this was just the introduction. We didn't show any YAML. Now we'll dive a bit deeper. But even this segment doesn't have any YAML. Yay! So speaking about the problem, what is the problem? And the idea here is that application set is that a tool that you can use in multiple ways. Okay, it's not a single way. Maybe this is a bad thing for you because it's very flexible, or it's a good thing for you because it's very flexible, but you can use application sets for many scenarios. So the first scenario I'm going to talk, and this would be familiar to you if you're working in a company, is you have many different clusters and you want the same application there. Maybe you have some standard applications where you say, I want core DNS in all my clusters, or I want sealed secrets in all my clusters. So application sets are a way to do that. And you can think of this as the horizontal dimension, okay? Just keep this because it will be important for the next slides. So if you go to the next slide, Revital, here we have the vertical scenario, okay? It's the complete opposite. I have a single cluster and I want to deploy many applications. So that's the vertical dimension. And then if you combine them, and this is the most interesting scenario, it's this one, which is what we're going to talk about, where you have both dimensions, okay? You have many clusters and many applications. And usually you also have some different settings. So maybe, it's exactly the same application, maybe the base files, but you want different values or different overlays or different parameters. But this should be something very familiar to everybody who has worked with Kubernetes, because as soon as you launch a cluster, you want some standard applications for yourself. And then you also have your developers, if you're working with developers, that they also want their applications there. So you need those two dimensions. And I'm saying this because some people might, stay in the first scenario. Some people might stay in the second scenario. That's perfectly fine. Third scenario is the most interesting. And this is where most people get confused. Like they see this and they start creating their application sets and they have so many questions about how they're going to do this. And hopefully today we're going to give you some good directions. So go to the next slide there, Vital. First of all, I have to say that before you go into application sets, you must make a choice between Helm or Customize, or use both, it doesn't matter, but work with these first. Like, don't try to organize the configuration of applications inside Argo CD if you haven't mastered Helm or Customize. So if you're using Helm, learn Helm value hierarchies, work with your Helm charts, understand that I should be able as a developer to take any Helm chart and be able to install it without Argo CD on my local cluster as a developer with the correct settings. If you're using Customize, learn about overlays and how you work with overlays and what you want to do, okay? So make sure that you have this step finished. We're not going to talk about Helm and Customize today, but if you're not familiar with Helm and Customize, don't try to go into Argo CD application sets. You will make things much more difficult. The next thing that you're going to do is go to the documentation, okay? You know the classic saying, why spend 6 hours with documentation while you can spend 6 days working with something that you don't know how it works? Go into the documentation, learn the documentation, see all the generators that are offered, and we're going to talk about generators. At the very least, you should look at the Git generator, which allows you to create applications from folders. The cluster generator, where we're going to talk about this in the next slides, and also try to keep things simple. And I'm saying simple because some people start and they say, I will have a single application set for my whole organization. No, this doesn't work. You will create many application sets according to your environment. Okay, so that's the basics. That's what you should do.
So cost is basically one application set per environment. That's the recommendation.
This is just a suggestion. You see, as I'm saying, per environment or cluster type. Okay, this is just a starting point. If you see the slide, this is how you should start if you don't have any other direction or any other hints. Maybe in your company, you might do one per team, I don't know, or one per data center, or one something like this. Maybe go to the next slide and we'll talk about clusters. So the first thing you should do is look at your clusters and tag them. Okay, this is a basic idea. You should look at the cluster generator on why you should do this and tag them. And you can use whatever tags you want. Okay, this also answers another popular question with Argo CD. People ask, how do I do regions? Like, I have US and EU and Asia and I want to deploy there. how does Argo CD support regions? There isn't anything like building there for regions. It doesn't have this capability, but you can use tags and say this cluster is there, that cluster is there. Same thing for environments, for promoting between environments. So you can tag some clusters non-production, some clusters staging, some clusters QA or whatever you want to do, and each cluster should have many tags. That's the magic thing with tags. Okay, some people are getting confused here and they assign only one tag to a cluster. That's a very common mistake, and I'm claiming no, you should put many tags on the cluster, and it doesn't have to be the same tags. Here I have an example with mixed tags. Okay, so you do this first, and you can see we still haven't talked about application set YAML. Maybe this step for you, it might be something difficult. Maybe you need to go to your company and talk with 5 different people to make this decision. But for me, this is step 0, to sit down with the other people in the company and explain what are the types of classes that you have and how you want to split them. And tagging doesn't, affect any functionality. You're not changing anything. It's just for you and for Argo CD. So you need to do this, because in 99% of the cases, when you create a brand new cluster, it's not something that goes, in its own island. It's a cluster similar to another. Like you have 3 clusters in production and you add the 4th one, or you have 2 clusters in UA and add the 3rd one. So after you do this, go next to the next one, Levital.
We're getting into those tags, Kostas. You're specifically talking about labels on the cluster secrets.
Yeah. Remember, I'm not mentioning application set vocabulary yet. I'm just talking on a high level. Okay, this is still on a high level. This is why I said people should learn about the cluster generator and how it works and how it allows you to select which clusters that you want, because by default, when you use the cluster generator, it selects all clusters.
Yeah,
so after you do this, then you do the second phase
of your clusters, and think about the layout of everything and
the layout. And after you do this, after just tagging the clusters, you sit down and do what for me is like the main work. You assign applications and environments and types. And this is still high level. You say these clusters are considered production. These clusters are running in AWS. These clusters are running there. And I want to make a choice in my company and say, I want all my AWS clusters to have this. Or I want my production clusters to have this. Maybe for this, you also need to talk with the developers. Okay, so here, I'm talking about some steps where I'm spending 5 minutes, but maybe in your company, this might take 2 days, to talk with all the people and understand what is there. So after you do this, and this is the most critical point, you have all the pieces to finally apply application sets and go to the next one, Revital. No, this is the example I talked before. Like when somebody requests to you a brand new cluster, in the ideal scenario, you just use some existing tags. Like somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need a brand new cluster in production, in Europe, in GCP, and you assign the appropriate tags. Or somebody says to you, hey, in QA, where we have our clusters for, AI training, I want a brand new cluster. This is what happens 99% of the time. So this should be something super simple for you to just add tags on a cluster. Go to the next, Revital. Yeah, I'm saying how you can assign the tags. Like this is the discussion that Luke talked about before, like how you bootstrap, how you start both Argo CD and how you start creating the clusters. And this is another big discussion. But once you have the cluster and you have created it with Terraform or Pulumi or whatever, you just give it to Argo CD, and Argo CD will do whatever needs to be done. Like you just gave Argo CD a brand new cluster, and you told Argo CD, this is a new production cluster in Europe, and it's production. Do whatever needs to be done. I don't care, okay? It's not the place that for you there to decide on applications. Go to the next one, Vital. So this is the scenario that we want to avoid, and that I still see in a lot of companies where developers request a cluster, and they need to give a complete rundown of what they want to see in this cluster, or they open a ticket and somebody needs to create the cluster and then go back to the ticket and ask them, why do you want to install there? And so on and so on. Or you have to make a decision and say, this is for developers. So what do they need? Oh, they need seal secrets. I need to install this. No, you should not work like this. This is not how you do stuff. The correct way, go to the next one, Revital, is this, okay? for me, I'm happy if you're working like this in your company. You start a brand new cluster, and you just ask, what is the type of this cluster? And maybe type for use and environment, location, it doesn't matter. And that's it. You see, the developer doesn't say anything else here. The developer doesn't say, I want this application, that application, that application. You know this already because you should have this in your application sets. So if you're using application sets with Argo CD, creating a brand new cluster should be, help me here, look, 5 minutes. Okay, can you do this in 5 minutes? Like how much time it takes for Terraform? Okay, 15 minutes to create the cluster. And then after 10 minutes, you have the applications there. That's it. So it would be super easy for developers to ask clusters, for administrators to create clusters, for people to extend environments.
And we have
we have a question. How would I pass a cluster name as a variable? Okay, great question. So there isn't, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't a concept of cluster name. This doesn't exist. I'm talking about plain Kubernetes, okay? With Kubernetes, you cannot really name a cluster. You only have a kubeconfig configuration that you point to the cluster, but that name doesn't mean anything. Maybe I name the cluster banana, and Dan has named the cluster whatever. So this doesn't exist in vanilla Kubernetes. And with Argo CD, again, there is a name of the cluster, but it's how Argo CD recognizes the cluster, okay? It's how you have connected the cluster to Argo CD. And maybe in one Argo CD instance, you name it banana, and in another Argo CD instance, you name the same instance lollipop. It doesn't matter. So for me, you should use labels and tags, okay? You shouldn't talk with regards to cluster names. You should regard cluster groups. And when you're talking with somebody, you're saying, hey, in production, we have 5 clusters and they are in the AWS. What are the names? I don't care. So if you're doing something with names of the clusters, I personally don't think that you should do it. You should talk about capabilities.
Yeah, when you add the cluster to Argo CD, you can give it a name. But like Kostas said, it's arbitrary. Like it's not pulled from the cluster itself. It's not like there's some entity there. So it's a good point. I mean, you can't rely on it as sort of a canonical like reference.
Yeah, so if your application set is trying to do something like, I want in the cluster named production do X, it shouldn't be like this. It should be, I want in the
Based
cluster tagged production do X.
Luke, do you use names, or are you just rely entirely on tags?
Rely all on the tags or the labels that we're creating.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, the names are all relative to Argo CD itself, how you create things in Argo.
Yeah, I think it's important that I'm explaining, the theory from my tower, the ivory tower. But Luke here is in the battle, like in the real battle. So he can, either validate what I'm saying or saying, I have some differences. But I'm doing, remember, the easy stuff, okay? Luke will do the hard stuff. Okay, so finally...
Yellow alert, look out.
Yeah. No, I finished my part. I finished my part. So from now on, we can talk about YAML. That's fine. But I wanted, for people to understand why we're using application sets and what is the end goal. Like the end goal is to be able to create clusters in 5 minutes, assign the applications there in 5 minutes, and assign everything that the developer needs in 5 minutes. No, Laurent has an answer. I had the tag to reflect the name. Yeah, you can even use like a tag as a name if you want. That's not something I recommend. But if you want to do this, remember that you can assign multiple tags to a cluster.
Yeah, the main reason I would think to do it, Kostas, is just for some logging later. You want to be able to recognize which cluster something is happening on for some debugging purposes.
Yeah, true. But I'm guessing that the person that is asking this has some kind of configuration somewhere where they want to do something different for that cluster, like, create different settings or different applications. And this is why I'm against that.
Yeah.
Try not to parse the name and do something based off of the name. You're just going to have a lot of headache with that. When you're thinking of the tags, thinking of the labels, think of, as we're going to get into details here, think of the key value pairs that you want to create that hierarchy. Don't just tag it dev, tag it environment, dev.
Mhm.
So how do you debug in terms of logging? How do you know what is happening in each cluster if you don't use the names? I'm assuming you can use other things.
It's going to be, again, these labels that you're going to be creating, and that's when you are adding a cluster, connecting to it in Argo CD, that cluster secret that describes the cluster itself, that's where you're applying all those details. So if you don't put any tags in there, you're out. That cluster is not going to be necessarily useful or helpful if it doesn't work in your tagging scheme.
Yeah, this is what I'm assuming the people want. They want to use the name of the cluster in some configuration, and then I will play the game 5 whys. Why do you want the name of the cluster in that application, and why does it have to come from Argo CD? Maybe it can come from somewhere else. Maybe it's a config map in your application. Maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe it's not something that is known to Argo CD, but it's not something known only to your application.
I mean, it happens to work out for us that we name, like in EKS, we name our clusters the same way that we're going to use them. So like the cluster name is really boring, where it's like some domain. So infrastructure /dev /east is the name. And I put all of those as labels in the secret and such. So you can reconstruct the name from all the labels if you really need that. But yeah, don't feel like you have to be conservative on the number of labels. Just put as much information as you can, add as many labels, put names, different parsing of the labels or of the name, whatever you need to do that. We even have part of our how some of our cluster DNS works. We put that in the label. So then an app, I think like the user was saying like, oh, I need to pass some kind of URL into the Helm chart saying you are located at this ingress address. You can pass that. We put all that in our labels, and you can then pass that through an application set to the application to the Helm chart. But yeah, it's going back to like the beginning of Kostas' talk, like think ahead of time, plan a lot about what you're doing and how you can reuse things and push data around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So now I'm assuming Luke is taking over?
Yeah. We'll jump through these slides. They're getting into some details about some specific use cases, and we'll kind of just think about these slides later as we're all discussing about application sets and different experiences with them. But yeah, like this slide, it's a little more YAML version of how an application set creates many applications. And if you want to go to the next slide, these are all of the generators you have available. I think there's more. There's a plugin generator. So if you don't like what's here, you can write a plugin to do something else. It's there. It's at the bottom. Sorry. But yeah, so you have all of these available to you. We've talked a lot about Git and cluster. I heavily abuse the pull request generator. There's a lot of dangerous things you can do with it. And then as well, there's really exciting things you can do with matrix and merge. So take all of these various generators and use them in some kind of pattern to combine them. Going back to like how Kostas was thinking about the vertical or the horizontal slicing of your clusters and your applications. These use like the matrix generator or merge to build that construct of those slices if you want.
Wait, Revital, go one back. Dan, you want to go ahead?
Well, I was going to say that with the pull request generator, so like these things can be combined even outside of each other. So like a matrix generator, you can have two generators creating an application with same values. But in our level 3 GitOps training, there's an example where we actually use two application sets. One that is on a pull request generator, which generates clusters, V clusters. It generates new V clusters, and then each of those is automatically added to Argo CD with some labels and things. And then there's a cluster generator that picks up those V clusters and then automatically deploys the original pull request. So you can actually get them even more funky than just having them combined within a matrix. You can actually have them generating things that cause and trigger other things to generate. You don't want to get too crazy with it. You don't want to chain like 4 of these things. You'll start to get a little confused about what's going on, but they're very powerful in that way.
Yeah, I was going to say the easiest way to start is out of those generators, look on the Git one, just to pick your applications from Git, the cluster generator for tagging your clusters, and then the matrix generator to combine them. You can disregard the rest of the generators if you're just starting out, okay? Remember, Git, cluster, matrix. And then when you feel that you are familiar with them and you want to go to the next level, go and look at everything else.
Yeah, simplest is probably list, because you don't even need anything else, right? You can just have a list and have it generate right inside the application set. But I agree otherwise.
Yes, but then some information is inside the application set, which is something that is not very great. Like if you have 3 clusters, why use a list to represent the 3 clusters? Use the cluster generator to represent the 3 clusters.
That's true. Yeah. The list, that is a very good point. People do abuse the list generator. In general, if you follow Kostas and I and the way that we've talked about this for a long time, we try to keep special configuration out of the application and out of the application set as much as possible, to keep it in the YAML of like the sources of those things. Because it just, when you start, the more you start mixing stuff into that layer, it can cause some confusion and problems.
And this gets, like, even in the beginning, we were talking about, like, you want to use application sets to avoid creating many applications, because you don't want to be editing all of these applications all of the time as things change. And same with an application set. You kind of want to set it and forget it. Ideally, you've parameterized things properly and it just runs. And you don't want to be making lots of pull requests to change your application set based off of environmental changes, things like that. Just getting into some details about pull requests. Let's pull these out of a previous ArgoCon talk, talking about some lessons learned. Specifically here, an example with pull request. As you're thinking about how you design everything, you also think about how you, as an example in pull request, how do you label things in your Git repos, in your Git, whether it's GitHub or Bitbucket, things like that. How do you label things there so that this generator can link to those labels, and people can use kind of true GitOps where they can go into GitHub, change a label, and an application gets deployed or gets destroyed arbitrarily. It's pretty great. But if you have a giant, if you run in mono repos for your app, so you have a giant a repo with hundreds of pull requests, just one label might not be enough. You can add many labels. So you might say, all right, these combination of labels for this app, another combination of labels for another app. Otherwise, it can become really unwieldy on this.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go to the next slide. Here's an example of merge and pull requests and Git generators. So here's like saying more complexity of how you might pull things together. And we'll get into this a little later as well. There's pointing out a merge key comment here. And there's a pull request that fixes this, makes it more available. Not all generators operate and share the same data the same way, but it's getting better. There's a lot of great work being done in the community, bringing these things in together. But yeah, this is an example of how you can do things a lot more with a lot more complexity. Like in the Git generator, like go look through a repo for a specific file, and if this file exists in a certain folder, create an application for that. And so simply, again, through GitOps, your applications get created and destroyed automatically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is another one. Speaking of pull requests, how I use them. They have a requeue toggle here. You can turn that way down don't ever do that. You'll end up DDoSing your Git host. So don't use that. Use there's something else we haven't talked on here is there's a webhook for application set controller. So Argo has 2 webhook endpoints, one for Argo CD for the rest of the apps, but there is one for the app set controller, so it can listen to Git events as well. So as you scale to really large environments, a lot of usage out of this. You'll see in the HA scaling guides for Argo CD how to use webhooks. This is another one of those webhooks you should be looking at. Another slide. This just gets into how you do templating in an application set. So it's all Go template language. So if you are familiar with Helm, it's a lot like that, almost nearly the same. You have all the Sprig library functions, most of them available to you. If you watch the demo that Dan and I did, we show you how you can programmatically abuse this templating to generate millions of applications. What was that question? What was
we have a question here.
Sets I can deploy in Argo CD HA? I don't think there's a hard limit. I run hundreds of, I'm only up to hundreds of application sets.
Yeah, the main function is actually how many applications are being generated and what those applications are using. The bottleneck isn't typically the application set itself, though there can be a requeue time like Luke was talking about on the pull request. We did an example that we talked about a while ago where, at Paris, we talked about it where it was running on like every existing pull request, and it was just like it actually ran out of API requests on the Git repo, right? So there's different bottlenecks you can hit depending on the generator you're using and those kinds of things. For just a straight application set, you could have thousands of them. I'm sure that we would run into some slowdown at some point, but typically what we see is that the bottleneck happens on the application side. They've got 5,000 applications and each one has tons of resources, and maybe etcd can't keep up with returning what's going on. And you need to start thinking about how you're going to divide up clusters, or you may be using vCluster to scale that. You need to be scaling number of repo servers. Maybe you need to increase memory. So there's probably, I don't want to scare people about it, but like there's definitely more than dozens of different knobs that you can tweak to get scaling happen. But typically application sets itself is not the barrier up front. I would say, Luke, you guys are running hundreds, which is definitely on the high end. Most people, application sets are used extensively, but we don't see hundreds in a single instance too often, just because each one is going to be generating a bunch of applications, and that means you've got whatever hundreds times however many applications they're generating. So that's where it starts to get into stuff.
Yeah. Let me look at the one last slide. The next one. This is just another more fun with YAML. How nested can you make things? This was one of our demos, Dan, from like how crazy can you do things. So this was like, I think this one would pull every Helm chart from the Bitnami repo and deploy. It would go discover every Helm chart, deploy every application to every cluster available to this instance of Argo. So it's a good way to get some fireworks in your system. Deploy a bunch of things there. So that was kind of it for those details. I could talk more.
Yeah, before we talk about PRs, one of the things I want to talk about with application sets, in the past, when you wanted to test this, the only way to do it was YOLO, throw it on the cluster, and then see what happened. And it's you could watch the application set control, and it would go through and it would show you applications it's generating, and you'd see the applications popping up in your cluster. And so this made application sets super powerful, but they made them a little bit scary because you couldn't always tell exactly what it was going to output at the end. And in this last release of Argo CD, actually it's 2 releases ago, we added 2 new tools to help you preview those changes. One of them is a dry run server side, so you can actually run the application set server side, test what applications it's going to generate, and start getting into the diffs of those. And another one is a local application set generator for the CLI. So you can start to get some testing on these. I don't think it's perfect because ultimately what you want to do is you want to like generate all the applications and you want to preview all of the diffs that it will create, because maybe you're passing different values to those generated applications. So there's still some, comfortability that you want to gain with application sets as you start to use these, and a good process and strategy for how you're going to roll them out into production, because a small change in an application set could affect thousands of applications. And depending on how you have like sync policies set up, deletion policies, if you're using sync windows, you can potentially delete resources you didn't intend to. And so you want to be definitely careful with them, because they are so powerful that you're doing that in a very, thoughtful manner, I would say.
There's another new flag in application sets that's really powerful as well. It's a sync policy for application sets, so you can set them to only create applications, don't delete them, or create and delete, or create update only. So you can, as you're adjusting, if this is deploying production applications, or create the production application but don't ever delete it, I will go manually delete apps if I need to do that, or I'll create a workflow with the proper checks to go delete applications later. But let the application set go create all of them. So look at those as well.
One last gotcha, and then we'll kind of move on. Things like sync windows, which will specify, you can say, for example, don't allow any application synchronization to happen on the weekend. I don't care if somebody pushes a change to Git or somebody messes with production. We just don't want anything to happen on the weekend. Well, an application set generates applications. It doesn't have anything to do with syncing by itself. So it will generate new applications, and those applications, if they're like deleted, for example, that will cause deletion of the app. Depending on if you have finalizers set and some other things set on the application, it will delete the resources because it's not a sync event, it's a deletion event. So there's little things like that there's nuances to this that we cover in the GitOps training and certification. So if you haven't done it, this is all stuff that we go through. We talk about those nuances and how they work. And definitely, like, as you want to go into production and be really strong with application sets, which is going to make you way more productive, it definitely is good to like make sure you know all that stuff. So a little plug for the training and certification if you haven't done it, to definitely check that out. And then I think before we're going to talk about a couple of pull requests that are coming on, but before we do, Ravital, you wanted to bring back some more head scratchers for us.
Let's do this. Okay, so we are in the myth or a fact, and I'm going to add it back to the stage. So you can't use application sets with Helm chart. And
this is a good test for how closely people were paying attention to the
Yeah,
last
this should be
point.
easy. If you remember what I said, this should be super easy.
I paid super careful attention, and it's pretty simple. So I'm expecting to see many comments with the right answer.
Yeah, myth or fact? Myth or fact?
I knew it. So it's a myth. And let's move to the next one.
So I don't think we have a Helm repo generator. That would be a different kind of generator. We did mention you can make your own generators though. So you could make a Helm repo generator, and as soon as you add the Helm repo, you could have it do things like deploy every single chart from that Helm repository. Nobody's had that use case yet, but maybe someday.
Okay, and let's have another one. Application sets support both manual and automated updates. So is it a myth or is it a fact?
Ooh.
10 seconds.
That is a tricky one.
Yeah, this one's a little tricky because
It's
it
a
depends
tricky
on
one.
what you mean.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I didn't get it right.
So yeah, you can't, there's no manual application set generation, right? There's no button you can press that says generate applications. So in the same way that with Argo CD, you have a sync button that triggers synchronization. You don't have that for an application set. It's just going to generate the applications on the schedule that it's set to generate them. And there's no way to like make that in a manual process. But once the application is created, of course, then it can be set to do manual syncing or anything like that.
Okay, last riddle. Maybe not for the day, but for now. So I take a list of items one by one, each item unique, but part of the fun. I create multiple apps from a single source, with each item distinct but staying on course. What am I? I need the 10 seconds countdown.
These are clever little rhymes, Ravital. Did you use AI to help you get these rhymes in place?
Of course I did.
Oh yeah, okay. It's like, this is hard.
Yay!
Yeah,
This generator. Yeah. So I was able to answer this one thanks to you guys, and thanks for the clarification on all of the generators. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, let me take a look at the comments. Yeah. We will be moving on to the PRs.
So these are a couple of, application sets are under active development. There's always changes being made and new features being added. We didn't even talk about progressive sync, which is a whole other cool feature that application sets have, where you can specify like only generate new versions of applications to a block of environments at a time, for example. So you can have stuff like, if you have lots of clusters, you can have it go
Dan,
to
on the next one. On the next one about promotion, not now.
Oh, we'll talk about it in that one. Okay, all right. So let's see. This one is
a lot of episodes to go, right?
You're right. Yeah. We don't have to do it all at once. I'm sorry. You're right. Cheers. All right. All right. So this is a pull request to support more than 2 child generators for the matrix generator. So Luke, you and I talked about this as a limitation that back in Paris. I hate to keep referencing Paris, but it sounds like we're like in the Born Identity, and it's like, oh, remember Paris? But yeah, there's a hard limit on the matrix generator of allowing 2 child generators, but that was just added for the simplicity of implementing original matrix generator. Theoretically, you could have, hundreds. You could combine tons of generators. So I wanted to ask, and I have my own thoughts on this, but I wanted to ask Luke and Kostas, what do you think about this as a feature? Because this one's been around, as you can see, this pull request has been around for about 1.5 years, and there's been a lot of discussion about it. What are your guys' thoughts on that as a feature?
I mean, like you were saying, in our time in Paris.
Luke, you go first.
It would have made our experiment, so our talk was like, how can we break application sets? How can we break Argo CD? And if we could have done matrix generators with no limits of child generators, that would have solved our problem and really quickly. We had to do a bunch of embedded Helm of application sets trickery kind of thing to pull off breaking Argo. So this would have made it a lot easier to do that. So I guess that's my concern is application sets are rife with foot guns all over the place. And this, I think, again, just be careful. I think with the new tools, the ways to debug things, the dry run capabilities, now that we have those, I think it's a lot safer to do things like this. So yeah, I think this would help out. it becomes interesting. What is your use case? Why would you need to explode out the matrix of possibilities? But I don't see why we would arbitrarily stop you from doing that. If you have your use case, let's let you configure it. I mean, default it to 2, make it a parameter kind of thing, and warning if you do more.
Yeah, I have a more general answer, not specifically for this PR. Application sets are a tool, and it's nice to see people are using this tool and making great things for it. But it's time we put complexity. We need to stop and ask: is this complexity needed or not? And it's time we add a brand new feature in application sets. This is more points for confusion, more foot guns, as Luke said, something that you need to pay attention to the benefits versus the complexity you put in. I can actually bet that maybe in 5 years somebody will cut forward and say application sets are too complex. Here is a brand new feature or something that will cut down the complexity, and we will just look back and see how we reach this complexity because we were adding feature after feature after feature.
Yeah, so I I think I'm in a similar vein as both of you, and I will tell just the quickest of stories. But I was one day I happened to find myself seated between, and I won't use their names because I haven't gotten their permission to necessarily share the story, but I was seated next to me was a senior engineering VP at Google that was working on Google Kubernetes engine. And then on the other side from me was the same level person at AWS. And the person at AWS had been talking about getting support for more nodes on their clusters. And I turned to the Google person and I was like, what do you think about that? Should they push the limit above 5,000? It was 5,000 at the time. I think it's 5,000 now, but Google has a special version that you can get 30,000 on. I asked, I was like, what do you think? And they said, well, first of all, if AWS wants it, they can open the pull request. And then they said, and second of all, if you need more than 5,000 nodes, you might want to rethink how you architected this thing in the first place. And that would be kind of my first thought looking at this feature is like, it's cool that we could do it, but also I wonder like if there's not a better way to get to this that would be a little bit more predictable and a little less wieldy. Like you said with Luke, with the number of foot guns with application sets, it makes me nervous to extend it in this way. And this has been this conversation's going on. So if you disagree, hey, this is open source. Get in here and make your comments. And I know that there are a number of Argo maintainers who have said, actually, I think we would like to have this feature. There's still a couple that are a couple of the key ones that are saying, I'm not sure if I'm ready for it yet. So yeah, definitely go in and add your own comments on this pull request if this is something you'd like to see, or if you agree with the panel and feel like maybe this is a level of complexity we shouldn't be bringing to this tool. So okay, with that, what's our next one, Rubital?
So our next one is this guy.
Yeah, I brought this one up. I'm really happy the contributions that are coming in for this one as well. And this is almost like the opposite direction of the last one we're looking at, where Matrix can explode out the number of applications you have. When you're looking at merge generator, you're trying to reduce the number of applications you generate, like find some commonality between a few other generators and create a subset of that. One of the challenges, again, I think, as application sets, the controller got merged into Argo CD, and as generators have been developed over time, not all generators kind of report back the same data that you can then merge on. So when you have two different generators, you're merging on them, there's going to be some keys that come back, and you specify a merge key saying some label, some identifier, usually like a cluster name or something like that, is some commonality between the two data sets returned. And that union is what my new application will be. This pull request extends. There's a optional values property that you can attach to some generators. This fixes adding it to the rest of the generators. I think this is the last one that needs it. And so this allows, just gives you more possibility when it comes to the merge generation. Others have any comments, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the disambiguation of values across generators is pretty important to do. And it was one of those things that when I was looking at it, I was like, wait, we didn't do this originally, like when we first did the pull request. When we first did the application sets, that seems like a no-brainer. So this one, I think, was just going through there was some procedural stuff with like the build tool chain. They had made some modifications and that needed to be moved to a separate PR. And I think that one's been merged now. And so we're now into the merge conflict situation where because it's been around for a long time, there's just a lot of random little merge conflicts that I think can probably be eliminated, but it's just going to take the contributor a little bit of time to do it. Kostas, Rivital, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I have a comment. First of all, as a reminder, the PR generator is a bit special, unlike the other generators, because usually people use it for preview environments or temporary environments. So in this case, I'm saying maybe because it's special, it's okay to allow more flexibility and maybe some ways to get outside of the strict GitOps mindset. So I'm fine in this pull request, and anything else that adds value to the pull request. If you ask me, maybe we need to look at this, in terms of advertising. Like people want to do temporary preview environments, and they don't know that the PR generator exists. So let's add features to the PR generator in order to make every use case possible and help people with their preview environments. But only for the PR generator, okay? Not the other generators for the production stuff.
We did have some. Did we address these? Somebody asked for a link to the GitOps certification. So we can throw that banner up right now. It's learning.codefresh.io. Definitely go do that if you haven't. There are over, I think there's 28 labs across the 3 levels of certification. Somebody was asking what's a good book in our Discord this morning, was asking what's a good book to read in Argo CD, and I was like, certification. So it's like that's a book worth of content. So if you haven't done it, definitely do it. And you will get an invite to the GitOps Champions Discord, where you can hang out with Rivital, myself, sometimes Kostas, sometimes Luke, and shoot the breeze. This morning, people were talking about what workout routine they like the most. So all kinds of overlap for the Argo community.
Yes. Not only GitOps.
This is a question from Jeffrey. He asks, what decision points go into using a single Argo instance org-wide versus one per cluster environment or some other combination? Is it more security or performance-related decision?
If you look at my talk in Amsterdam, we talked about...
Wait, first, Dan, show the article. There is an article. If you just Google search an overview of Argo CD architectures, you should find...
Yeah, it's in
the first stop.
It got moved from the blog into the Learning Center. Okay, I didn't expect that. All right, let me...
Yeah, either post the link or show the Google search.
I think I have to make a banner for it. I don't know how to make a banner.
So we should say that this is one of the most common questions that people ask. Maybe it's number 2 question. Like number 1 is how you install Argo CD. Number 2 is this question. And number 3 is how you do secrets. So this is question number 2. And Dan wrote a whole article exactly showing the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, so I'll share. Let's see. Here we go. This is the article. I didn't recognize it because it moved from the from the blog post. But yeah, we go through all the different architectures. So hub and spoke is the one that most people are familiar with. You have a single Argo with many clusters. Standalone is you have one Argo per cluster. There's also split instance where you have a component that lives in one cluster, but components that live in each cluster. which is like the Argo CD agent, which is something that Red Hat's been developing. And then there's a control plane approach, which CodeFresh does, where you add a control plane and you can have a hub and spoke and standalone. And we go pretty in depth on all of the different reasons why and why not for these different things. I think if we were to sum it up, it boils down to blast radius. Something goes wrong, can you update production? Something that happened in staging, can that break some changes making it to production? So blast radius is a big one. Network availability, are they in the same continent? Are you going across from Asia East to US West? In that case, you're going to have some additional latency, and it might not be worth it to do that. And then security is another concern, because Argo has a pretty strong security model and definitely is considered safe. But we also don't consider Argo CD for attacks too much from within. Once you've been given access to deploy stuff, we expect that you're supposed to be able to deploy stuff. And there are some ways that you could create some overlap and things. We've made it pretty difficult within the project, but like, if you think about what Argo CD is doing, repo server is checking out arbitrary code, and it is executing a build of manifests, and it's generating manifests. And so what's possible to do with Helm, what's possible with Customize, with JSON and these other tools, you can do quite a bit. And once you introduce like CMP plugins and things like that, then of course you're making it much more complex. So all of those things are considerations. If we have a way, Robital, I just sent you a link on Slack. If we can throw it into the banner.
I did.
There.
I just
did already. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I can do that again.
Since we're talking about application sets, do you think how you do application sets are affected by your architectural choices?
Yes. So first of all, I have to say that the cluster generator implies that you're not using the standalone model. You're using either a control plane or a centralized Argo CD instance. So that's the recommendation. But maybe you don't want to use the cluster generator and you want to hard code your cluster somewhere else. That's fine. But the answer is yes. The architecture affects your application sets a lot.
I would say, depending on what you do, you could not have that issue. It's like we're doing it, like myself, we do hub and spoke, but we do like a large production hub and spoke, but also our test and dev environments. Like, how do I test my different Argo environments? Our entire collection of application sets get deployed the same to all those instances of Argo, and based off of a cluster generator and the labels and tagging and things we were talking about before. In production, lots of applications get generated to all sorts of clusters because of all the tags that are available. In the other environments, there's hardly any clusters, hardly any tags that would fit the logic in an application set, so just nothing happens there.
Yeah, you could mix and match. Like some people might say in production, I'm using a central Argo CD instance or a control plane, but in preview environments, I don't care, and I have one Argo CD instance per cluster or per big cluster. You can do this as well.
Definitely read the article, check it out. And hey, that's another great intro if you're looking for professional help with your architecture and how you should be rolling out your Argo. We do offer a technical account management for Argo. And so you actually get access to an Argo expert with dedicated hours, and you can they'll help you review your architecture, what you're doing, and the plan for that, as well as professional Argo support. So if you just need support you've got a bunch of Argo, you want somebody you can call when something goes wrong, you can get help with that. Just codefresh.io, and there's a link to the support, and there's more information about the technical account management aspect as well. So that stuff is there. Little plugs here and there, little plugs for certification, little plugs for that. Some of that stuff is free. So if you join the GitOps Champions, that's a free thing you can do. The blog posts are obviously free. And great. And then Laurent said, I'm not sure my brain can take more generators, kind of like dimensions. I can do 3D. After that, not sure. So this might be a good time to introduce what's the database called? Vertex database? What's it? The AI database. It's a vector database. Maybe we should introduce a vector database generator that can autocomplete. It would be essentially an LLM that just generates applications out.
I challenge you, Dan, for the next
based on a
session.
vector database.
Dan, you have 2 weeks to implement that.
Yeah, to get it into Argo CD 3.0. Yeah, great plan.
Introduce that, just to introduce that in 2 weeks.
Well, I think we've done a good job covering it, and appreciate everybody responding and giving comments and
Yes.
participating and everything. Between now and ArgoCon, which is going to be April 1st, by the way, we will have some announcements. So stay tuned. We decided not to do that on April 1st because we're announcing some really cool stuff, and we didn't want people to think that it was a joke. So pay attention. We'll have some stuff to announce. Some new tools, new features. If you haven't tried CodeFresh, go to codefresh.io and you can create an account for free and do a 45-day trial experience of our tooling to do GitOps promotions, environment promotions. And then obviously, if you haven't done the certification, do the certification. Luke, what do you want to plug? This is like Hot Ones. If you get to the end of it, you get to plug something.
I mean, honestly, yeah, come to ArgoCon. You'll get to see us all. You can get my advice for free there. No certifications required.
Perfect.
I would like to say that if you have any question and you were not able to ask it, feel free to reach out to me, to Dan. We'll be here in 2 weeks, so you can also plug your questions there. But feel free to reach out through LinkedIn, through Twitter, through whatever. We're here, happy to answer any question, happy to get any feedback. If you would like to see any topic in the next episodes, we'll be happy to hear, and we will address that.
And our next episode will probably be
2 weeks.
A week from Monday. So whatever
17th.
that is.
March 17th.
Okay, so look forward to March 17th, and we'll be excited to get into another topic next time. Thanks, everybody, and
Thanks, Luke and Costis. Was fantastic to have you here. I'm assuming we will see you more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Dan. And thanks, everyone.
Signing off.